Imagine a nation on the brink, its political landscape a powder keg of tension and extremism. In the heart of Rome, a man who embodied the very spirit of compromise and democratic dialogue was about to become a pawn in a deadly game. His name was Aldo Moro, a former prime minister, and his disappearance would plunge Italy into its darkest hour, exposing the brutal realities of a clandestine war waged by the Red Brigades. Remember to comment, like, share and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of the Calendar of Crime. Before you carry on with the story, the late 1970s in Italy were defined by the Years of Lead, a period of intense social and political turmoil, marked by a wave of terrorism from both the far left and the far right. At the center of this storm was Aldo Moro, the president of the Christian Democracy Party. Moro was a master of political maneuvering, currently working on the historic compromise, Gora revolutionary plan to bring the Italian Communist Party into the government fold for the first time since the early days of the Republic. This move was intended to stabilize the nation, but it made him a primary target for those who saw such a compromise as a betrayal of their revolutionary ideals. On the morning of March 16, 1978, Moro left his home in Rome, heading to the Chamber of Deputies for a historic confidence vote on the new Andreotti government. His motorcade, consisting of a blue Fiat 130 and a white Alfetta, wound through the quiet residential streets of the city. As they reached the intersection of Via Fani and Via Stresa, the ordinary morning was shattered. A group of Red Brigades militants, some disguised in Alitalia airline uniforms to avoid suspicion, executed a clinical ambush. They blocked the cars, trapping Moro and his 5-man security detail in a deadly crossfire. The violence was swift and overwhelming. In less than 3 minutes, 91 bullets were fired. Moro's 5 bodyguards, Domenico Ricci, Oreste Leonardi, Francesco Zizzi, Giulio Rivera, and Raffaele Iosino, were cut down in a hail of automatic weapon fire. None of them had a chance to properly return fire. Their weapons were mostly stored in the trunks of the cars. Amidst the smoke and carnage, Moro was dragged from his vehicle and forced into a getaway car. The Red Brigades had achieved the unthinkable. They had kidnapped the most powerful politician in Italy. Moro was taken to a secret location, later identified as a small apartment in Via Montalcini, which the terrorists dubbed the People's Prison. For 55 agonizing days, he was held in a tiny, soundproofed room behind a false wall. During this time, he was subjected to a proletarian trial by the Red Brigades. The world watched in horror as the terrorists released photographs of a weary Moro, sitting in front of the group's iconic 5-pointed star flag, holding a newspaper to prove he was still alive. The kidnapping wasn't just an act of violence. It was a psychological assault on the very foundations of the Italian state. During his captivity, Moro was allowed to write letters. He wrote dozens of them, to his wife Eleonora, to his political colleagues in the Christian Democracy Party, and even a poignant plea to Pope Paul VI, who was a close personal friend. These letters are among the most haunting documents in political history. In them, Moro's tone shifted from calm political analysis to desperate pleading, and, eventually, to bitter condemnation of his own party. He begged the government to negotiate for his release, arguing that the state should value a human life over abstract principles of firmness. The Italian government, led by Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti and Interior Minister Francesco Cossiga, faced an impossible choice. They adopted what became known as the line of firmness, refusing to negotiate with the Red Brigades or exchange prisoners. They feared that any concession would legitimize terrorism and lead to the collapse of the state. On the other side was the line of negotiation, supported by Moro's family and some socialist politicians who argued that every effort should be made to save him. The standoff lasted for nearly 2 months, while the police conducted massive but ultimately fruitless searches across the country. As the weeks turned into months, the Red Brigades grew increasingly frustrated by the government's refusal to yield. They had demanded the release of 13 of their imprisoned comrades, but the state remained unmoved. Inside the People's Prison, Moro's health and spirit were failing. The terrorists eventually realized that their plan to force a state recognition of their movement had failed. On the morning of May 9, 1978, They told Moro they were moving him to another location. They bundled him into the trunk of a red Renault 4, covered him with a blanket, and fired 10 rounds into his chest. Later that day, a phone call from a Red Brigade's member directed the authorities to Via Caetani, a street in the historic center of Rome. The location was chillingly symbolic. It sat almost exactly halfway between the headquarters of the Christian Democracy Party and the Italian Communist Party. When police opened the trunk of the red Renault, they found Moro's body, his hands tied, a tragic end to a crisis that had paralyzed a nation. The image of the red car in the narrow Roman street became an indelible symbol of Italy's collective trauma. The assassination of Aldo Moro didn't just end a life, it ended an era of political possibility. The historic compromise died with him, and Italy entered a period of even deeper polarization. While many of the perpetrators were eventually captured and sentenced to life in prison, the Moro affair remains shrouded in mystery. Theories persist about the involvement of foreign intelligence agencies, the role of the P2 Masonic Lodge, and why the police failed to find the people's prison, despite numerous leads. To this day, the empty chair of Aldo Moro haunts the history of the Italian Republic. Thanks for watching. Please comment, share, like, and subscribe for future episodes from the Calendar of Crime.